July 2022. Lake Wunder in Denali National Park greeted fisherman Thomas MacDonald with silence. 62 years of life had taught him to read the water like an open book. But today, that book would tell a story that would change lives forever. The net caught something heavy at a depth of 8 meters. Thomas flexed his muscles and pulled. The metallic glint in the murky water made his heart beat faster. The military-style waterproof container looked as if it had been lying at the bottom for an eternity. Before we begin the story, please write which city you are from. We are very interested in where you are watching our video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your rating. Inside was a memory card in a sealed case. 9 years earlier, 3 young people had set off on a hike that was to be their last adventure. July 15th, 2013, 6 a.m. parking lot at the entrance to Denali National Park. Emma Richardson checked her camera equipment for the 3rd time. Her brown hair peeked out from under her baseball cap, and her green eyes sparkled with anticipation. At 28, she had already traveled halfway around the world with her camera. But the wild Alaska beckoned her especially. The batteries are charged, the memory cards are empty, she muttered as she put her Canon into a protective case. Jake Thompson tightened the straps of his backpack. His short, dark hair stuck out in all directions after a night in the car. A scar on his left cheek, a reminder of a mountain climb in Colorado, made his face look harder. 31 years old, half of which he had spent on extreme expeditions. "The route is difficult, but we'll make it," he said, studying the topographical map. 3 days to Wonder Lake. No one within 30 kilometers. Sophie Clark adjusted her video camera. Short blonde hair framed her face, and her blue eyes sparkled with excitement. At 26, she had already amassed 500,000 subscribers on her YouTube channel, Wild Places. "This is going to be epic," she laughed, pointing the camera at the mountains. "My viewers are going to go crazy for these views." None of them suspected that in 48 hours, their trail would be lost forever. The group set off at 7:30 in the morning. Jake led the way, Emma photographed every turn of the trail, and Sophie recorded a vlog. It was the usual start to a usual hike. But nothing is usual in Denali National Park. "Look, an eagle," Emma whispered, pointing her telephoto lens at the majestic bird. Jake stopped and raised his hand. The group froze. Something stirred in the bushes. A grizzly bear raised its head and looked at the people. A second of silence stretched into eternity. "Back up slowly," Jake said quietly. "Don't turn your back." The bear snorted and disappeared into the thicket. Their hearts were beating so loudly that it seemed they could be heard a mile away. "This is definitely going in the video," Sophie breathed, checking the recording. By evening of the first day, they reached their halfway point. The tent was up in 20 minutes. The freeze-dried dinner tasted like a delicacy after a 10-hour hike. "Tomorrow is the hardest part," Jake warned, studying the map by flashlight. "We have to climb up to the pass, then descend to the lake." Emma flipped through the photos on her camera. Each frame told a story of wild beauty. But she didn't know that she was capturing the last peaceful moments of their lives. The night passed quietly. Only the howling of wolves in the distance reminded them that civilization was far behind. July 16th, 2013, 6 a.m. The morning greeted them with fog. Visibility was no more than 50 meters. Jake frowned as he studied the GPS navigator. "The weather is getting worse," he said. "We may have to stay here for a day." "No way," Sophie objected. "I have a shooting schedule that's planned down to the minute." Emma nodded. "The fog will add drama to the photos." The decision was made. They moved forward into the white fog. The first 4 hours passed without incident. The trail wound between the rocks, gradually climbing upward. The fog cleared, revealing breathtaking views of the valley. "Lunch break," Jake announced at noon. They settled down on a flat rock overlooking the glacier. Emma clicked away with her camera. Sophie recorded another episode of her vlog. Jake checked the route. 6 hours to Lake Wonder, he reported. "We'll get there just in time for sunset." But they would not see the sunset quite as they had planned. After lunch, the trail became steeper. Their backpacks weighed heavily on their shoulders, and their breathing became labored. Every meter of elevation was a struggle. "Maybe we should take a break," Sophie suggested, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Just a little further," Jake replied. "The pass is close." They didn't notice that they were being followed. Someone was watching them from behind the rocks, studying their movements, planning their encounter. But they would find out too late. At 4:30 p.m., the group reached the pass. The view of Wonder Lake was breathtaking. The blue surface of the water reflected the snowy peaks. It was the perfect place for camp. "Unbelievable," Emma whispered as she took a panoramic photo. The descent to the lake took 2 hours. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky crimson. They reached the shore at 6:30 p.m. "Let's set up camp over there." Jake pointed to a flat area 100 meters from the water. Emma filmed the setting up of the camp. Sophie recorded comments for her vlog. Jake lit a fire, the usual camping chores that would soon be the last in their lives. At 7:15 p.m., their satellite phone registered its last signal. "Checking in with base," Jake said, dialing the Park Service number. "Hello, Ranger Station. This is Thompson's group. We've reached Wonder Lake. Everything's fine." That was the last time the outside world heard their voices. Dinner was cooking over the fire when a man emerged from the woods. He was a tall, middle-aged man, dressed in a park ranger uniform. His face was hidden by the shadow of his cap. "Welcome to Lake Wonder," he said in a calm voice. Jake stood up from the fire. "We weren't expecting to see anyone here. We're registered with the Park Service." "I know," the stranger nodded. "I'm here for work." But something in his voice made Emma tense. She discreetly turned on the video recording on her phone. "What kind of work?" Sophie asked. "We're not breaking any rules." The stranger moved closer. The light from the fire revealed his face. His features were harsh, his eyes alert, studying every detail of their camp. "There's been trouble with bears in this area," he said. "You'd better leave." Jake shook his head. "We have a 3-day permit, and we know how to deal with bears." The atmosphere was heating up. Emma sensed the danger before the others did. She gripped her phone tighter, continuing to film. "This isn't a request." The stranger's voice became harsher. "It's an order." "Who are you to give orders?" Sophie snapped. Then the man unholstered his gun. The next few minutes changed everything. Screams, panic, desperate attempts to escape. Emma's phone continued to record until it fell into the grass. When silence fell, Lake Wonder held a new secret. July 17th, 2013, 8 a.m. Ranger Station. A phone call broke the morning silence. Linda Richardson, Emma's mother, spoke incoherently. They were supposed to check in last night. Something happened. Ranger Michael Carlson wrote down the coordinates of the last GPS signal. Lake Wonder, an area where problems rarely occur. "We'll send out a search party in an hour," he assured the woman. But he didn't know he was looking for clues to a crime, not lost tourists. The helicopter reached the lake at 10:30 a.m. Pilot Steve Adams circled the shore twice before he spotted the camp. "I see tents," he reported over the radio, but no people. The search party landed on the shore. The scene was strange. The camp looked abandoned, but not destroyed. The tents were still standing, and belongings were lying around. "The fire went out hours ago," said Ranger Carlson, examining the ashes. "There are signs of a struggle here," shouted his colleague, pointing to the trampled grass. They found backpacks, sleeping bags, and camera equipment. But there were no people. It was as if the earth had swallowed them up. "Bears?" suggested one of the rescuers. "No blood, no torn clothing?" Carlson shook his head. "This is something else." The search continued for 3 days. The dogs lost the trail at the water's edge. Divers searched the bottom of the lake. Helicopters combed the surrounding area. Nothing. July 20th, 2013. Press conference. Detective Sarah Mitchell stood in front of the microphones. Short brown hair, serious eyes, years of experience investigating complex cases. "We are classifying the disappearance of 3 tourists as suspicious," she announced. "We are asking anyone who was in the area of Wonder Lake on July 15th, 16 to contact the police." But the calls yielded no results. There were no witnesses. The clues disappeared along with the people. The families refused to believe the worst. Linda Richardson organized a search fund. Alex Thompson, Jake's brother, hired a private investigator. Sophie's parents contacted the Canadian embassy. "We'll find them," Linda repeated in every interview. "They're out there somewhere." But days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Hope melted like snow under the spring sun. October 2013. The first snow covered Lake Wunder. The search was officially called off until spring. The case was handed over to detectives. Sarah Mitchell examined all the possibilities: accident, animal attack, foul play. But there was no evidence to support any of them. "People don't just disappear," she told her colleagues. "Someone knows the truth." The winter of 2013 to 2014 passed in futile attempts to find a lead. Detectives interviewed all park employees, checked alibis, and studied surveillance camera footage. Dead end. In the spring of 2014, the search resumed. The melting snow revealed new areas to investigate. But the lake remained silent. 2015, 2016. Fading. The case gradually became a cold case. Detectives were assigned new urgent investigations. The press lost interest. The public forgot. But the families did not give up. Every summer, Linda Richardson came to Alaska. She walked the same trails, hoping to find something. "She's out there somewhere," she whispered, standing on the shore of Lake Wonder. "My girl is out there somewhere." Alex Thompson spent all his savings on private investigators. One after another, they gave up without finding a single clue. Sophie's parents created a memorial website. Thousands of people left messages of condolence, but it didn't bring them any closer to the truth. 2017 to 2021, false hopes. Occasionally, there were reports of discoveries: a piece of fabric, an old backpack, human bones. Each time, the families waited with bated breath, and each time, the experts dashed their hopes. "It's not them," Sarah Mitchell announced after another check. In 2019, a tourist found a camera at the bottom of a stream 100 kilometers from the lake. Linda Richardson's heart stopped when she saw the Canon, exactly the same as Emma's. But the serial number didn't match. In 2020, a forest ranger reported 3 skeletons in a cave. The families flew to Alaska immediately. The experts concluded that the remains were animal bones. In 2021, a witness claimed to have seen Sophie in Anchorage. The police checked the surveillance camera footage. The girl only vaguely resembled the missing woman. Each false hope hurt more than the last. July 2022. The 9th anniversary. Thomas MacDonald wasn't thinking about the missing tourists when he went fishing. He had been to Lake Wunder hundreds of times over the past 30 years. He knew every bend and every shoal. An unusually warm winter had led to early ice melt. The water level had risen, exposing areas of the lake bed that had been hidden for decades. The net caught a container at sunrise. Thomas didn't immediately realize what he was holding. It was a military-style metal box, sealed shut. Inside was a memory card in a waterproof case. He called the Park Service an hour later. "This could be important," he told Ranger Carlson. "You'd better come yourself." Carlson arrived around noon. One look at the container was enough to know that it was connected to the missing tourists. "Call Detective Mitchell," he ordered his assistant. Sarah arrived 3 hours later. She had aged in the last 9 years, but her eyes burned with the same fire. She had waited too long for this moment. "Don't touch anything," she said, putting on gloves. "This is a crime scene." The memory card was in perfect condition. The waterproof case and the low temperatures of the lake had preserved the data. "Let's take it to the lab," Mitchell decided. "Right away." In the digital forensics lab, the card was plugged into a secure computer. Detective Mitchell, Ranger Carlson, and expert David Chen huddled over the monitor. "The files are reading," Chen reported. "The last entry is from July 16, 2013, at 7:43 p.m. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. 9 years of waiting were coming to an end. "Turn it on," she said. The screen came to life. The camp at Wonder Lake, a bonfire, 3 young faces, full of life, voices that hadn't been heard in 9 years. And then he appeared, a tall man in a ranger's uniform, his face lit by the bonfire, a voice demanding that they leave the lake. "I know him," whispered Carlson, staring at the screen. Who was he? Who had turned an idyllic lake into a crime scene? Who had forced 3 families to live in obscurity for 9 years? Part 2 of 3. "Robert Harris," Ranger Carlson said, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Bob Harris. Worked with us until 2012. Detective Sarah Mitchell froze. 9 years of searching, and the answer was so close. The face on the video belonged to Carlson's former colleague. "Why did he quit?" she asked, taking notes. "He didn't quit," Carlson replied grimly. "He was fired for disciplinary reasons." The video continued. Harris's voice grew harsher with every passing second. Emma, Jake, and Sophie tried to remain calm, but the tension was mounting. "Rewind to the part with the gun," Mitchell requested. Expert David Chen found the right part. Harris was unholstering his gun slowly, deliberately. The threat was clear. "It's a Glock 17, Chen said, recognizing the shape. "Standard issue for Rangers." Mitchell studied every detail of the recording. Harris's uniform looked authentic. His Ranger badge gleamed in the light of the campfire. But something was wrong. He was no longer authorized to wear that uniform in 2013, Carlson said. "That's a violation of the law." The recording cut off at the moment of highest tension. Screams, panic, sounds of a struggle. Then silence. "Where is Harris now?" Mitchell asked. Carlson shook his head. "I don't know. After he was fired, he disappeared. He lived somewhere in the woods as a recluse." The detective picked up the phone. "Put out an APB. Robert Harris, 58 years old, suspected of triple murder." But finding a man who had been hiding in the Alaskan wilderness for 9 years was no easy task. Robert Harris's personnel file revealed a grim history. 30 years of service in a national park. An impeccable reputation until 2010. Then something broke. The first complaints came in the spring of 2010. Mitchell read from the archives. Harris aggressively demanded that tourists leave certain areas of the park. Ranger Carlson recalled reluctantly. Bob changed after his divorce. He became withdrawn, suspicious. He said that tourists were destroying nature. Complaints piled up month after month. Harris exceeded his authority, threatened visitors, and violated procedures. Park management turned a blind eye to the veterans' behavior for a long time. In 2011, he threatened a group of students with a weapon. Carlson continued. That's when we realized Bob was dangerous. His dismissal in 2012 became inevitable. Harris surrendered his service weapon, uniform, and ID. But he clearly left something behind. Does he have a cabin in the woods? Mitchell asked. He bought a piece of private land, Carlson recalled, about 15 kilometers from Lake Wunder. They found the address in the land registry. The plot was in the middle of the taiga, with no roads leading to it. An ideal place for a recluse. The search party set out at dawn the next day. Detective Mitchell, Ranger Carlson, 4 SWAT officers. A helicopter took them to the edge of Harris's property. Be careful, Mitchell warned. He's armed and extremely dangerous. The trail to the cabin wound between the trees. Signs of human activity appeared after half an hour of walking. Cut branches, trampled paths, animal traps. He lives here, said the SWAT officer. The cabin stood in a clearing surrounded by tall fir trees. Wooden walls, a metal roof, smoke coming from the chimney. Harris was home. The team surrounded the building. Mitchell grabbed a megaphone. Robert Harris, police, come out with your hands up. Silence. Only the wind rustling in the treetops. We know you're in there. Come out voluntarily. The door of the cabin slowly opened. A tall man with gray hair appeared. His face was aged, but recognizable from the video footage. Bob, Carlson called out to him. Don't make this difficult. Harris looked calmly at the people surrounding him. Too calm for a man accused of murder. Hands on your head, commanded the SWAT officer. Harris complied slowly, as if he had been waiting for this moment for 9 years. A search of the cabin yielded shocking results. In the bedroom, they found a backpack with the initials JT, Jake Thompson. In the kitchen was a Canon camera that belonged to Emma. On the table was Sophie Clark's passport. Trophies, Mitchell said, examining the finds. He kept a record of his crimes. But the most terrifying discovery awaited in the basement. Harris's diary, which he had been keeping since 2010. Page after page described his growing hatred of tourists. They are destroying my land, he wrote, desecrating sacred places. Someone has to stop them. The entries became more aggressive with each passing month. Harris planned to protect the park from invasion by any means necessary. July 15, 2013. 3 trespassers at Wonder Lake. The last warning didn't work. Time to act. The last entry is dated July 16th. Problem solved? The lake is clean again. Harris was taken to the station for questioning. Detective Mitchell sat down across from the suspect. She had been waiting 9 years for this moment. The victims' families deserved answers. Robert, we found a video recording, she began. Your face is clearly visible. Harris remained silent, staring at the wall behind the detective. We have your diary, the victim's personal belongings. DNA evidence will confirm your presence at the crime scene. The silence continued. Where are the bodies, Robert? The families have a right to bury their loved ones. Then Harris spoke. His voice was calm, emotionless. They didn't listen to the warnings. What warnings? Lake Wonder is a sacred place. The spirits of the ancestors will not tolerate desecration. Mitchell realized she was dealing with a mentally ill man. Years of isolation in the forest had finished what his divorce had started. "You killed 3 innocent people," she said harshly. "I was protecting the land," Harris replied, "as I swore I would 30 years ago." His confession was recorded on video. But Harris showed no remorse. He believed his actions were justified. The search for the bodies began based on Harris's instructions. "The cave is 3 kilometers north of the lake," he said during the next interrogation. "They are resting there." The search party found the cave 2 days later. It was a natural cavity in the rock, hidden by thick bushes. Harris had carefully camouflaged the entrance. The remains of 3 people lay deep inside the cave. Forensic experts confirmed the identities of the victims. Emma, Jake, and Sophie had finally been found. The families flew to Alaska for identification. 9 years of uncertainty ended with a terrible truth. "Now we know," cried Linda Richardson. "My girl is no longer missing." Alex Thompson stood silently at his brother's coffin. There were no words for such grief. Sophie's parents hugged each other, unable to believe what was happening. The investigation pieced together the crime. Ballistics confirmed that the bullets in the victims' bodies came from Harris's gun, the same Glock 17 he didn't turn in when he quit. "Harris shot them near the camp," the expert reported. Then he moved the bodies to the cave. DNA analysis found traces of Harris on the victims' clothes. He had touched them while dragging them to the burial site. This was a planned crime, Mitchell concluded. Harris knew what he was doing. The motive became clearer with each passing day of the investigation. Diary entries revealed the mind of a sick man. But what exactly had broken in the former ranger's mind? What had turned a nature conservationist into a cold-blooded killer? What demons had driven him to commit the crime? "I need a psychiatrist," Harris's lawyer said. "My client is not responsible for his actions." Detective Mitchell knew that a difficult trial lay ahead. The victims' families demanded justice. But would they get it? Of Part 3 of 3rd September 2022. Psychiatric Evaluation. Dr. Elizabeth Crawford had been studying Robert Harris for 3 weeks. 30 years of practice had taught her to read people's souls like open books. But this case had her stumped. "Tell me about your childhood, Robert," she asked during another session. Harris sat motionless, staring out the window of the cell. Behind the bars, he could see the mountains of Alaska, the very ones he considered his own. "My father taught me to love nature," he said monotonously. "We went hiking every weekend." Growing up in a family of foresters shaped his worldview. Nature was a temple. People were uninvited guests. But what turned love into hate? "When did you first feel anger toward tourists?" Harris paused. A shadow of memory flashed across his eyes. 1995. A group of students had a picnic at Denali Falls. They left trash behind and broke young trees. I spent 2 days cleaning up after them. Dr. Crawford took notes. The seeds of hatred had been sown 27 years ago. "Tourists think nature exists for their entertainment," Harris continued. "They don't understand. The earth is alive. It feels pain." An examination revealed borderline personality disorder, exacerbated by years of isolation. Harris couldn't tell the difference between reality and his own fantasies about sacred spirits. But that didn't make him legally insane. The defendant was aware that his actions were illegal, Dr. Crawford concluded. He is fit to stand trial. October 2022. The trial begins. The courtroom in Anchorage is packed. The triple murder case at Wonder Lake has captured the nation's attention. Journalists fill the front rows. Judge Margaret Anderson, a woman with 30 years of experience, declared the court in session. The state of Alaska versus Robert Harris, charged with first-degree murder of 3 persons. Prosecutor David Miller rose from his seat. An experienced lawyer, he knew the evidence was irrefutable. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you will see a video recording in which the defendant threatens the victims with a weapon. You will hear his own confession. You will be convinced of his guilt. Defense attorney Roger Black chose a different strategy. My client is a sick man. Years of isolation have destroyed his mind. He needs treatment, not prison. The victims' families sat in the front row. Linda Richardson clutched a photo of Emma. Alex Thompson kept his eyes fixed on Harris. Sophie's parents held hands. The first day of the hearing, the prosecutor presented a video recording from a memory card. The courtroom fell silent as they watched the last minutes of 3 young people's lives. Emma's voice, "We're not breaking the rules." Harris's voice, "This is not a request, this is a demand." The sound of a holster being unbuckled rang out like thunder on a clear day. Linda Richardson covered her face with her hands. Seeing her daughter's last moments was unbearable. "Your Honor, I request a recess," asked the defense attorney. But Judge Anderson shook her head. The jury must see the whole truth. The recording continued. Screams, panic, the sound of gunshots, then silence. "These are the last images the victims saw," said Prosecutor Miller. "The defendant took their lives in cold blood." Witness testimony. Ranger Carlson talked about Harris's dismissal. "He had threatened tourists before. We should have acted more decisively." Detective Mitchell described the investigation. "We spent 9 years looking for answers. The video gave them to us." A ballistics expert confirmed that the bullets matched. All 3 victims were killed with the defendant's gun. Dr. Crawford explained Harris's mental state. He suffers from a disorder, but remains sane. Each testimony strengthened the prosecution's case. The defense tried to elicit sympathy. "Robert Harris dedicated his life to serving nature," said defense attorney Black. "Divorce broke him. Getting fired finished him." But the jury saw the facts. 3 young lives were cut short by the whim of a sick man. Mental illness is no excuse for murder, the prosecutor reminded the jury in his closing argument. Harris's own testimony was the culmination of the trial. "Do you regret what you did?" his lawyer asked him. Harris looked at the victims' families. There was no hint of remorse in his eyes. "I was protecting sacred land," he replied. "The spirits of our ancestors demanded purification." Linda Richardson jumped to her feet. "My daughter just wanted to take pictures of nature. How dare you?" Court officers restrained her from rushing toward the defendant's bench. "They desecrated Wader Lake." Harris continued unperturbed. "I did my duty." Those words sealed the fate of the trial. The jury saw a man without a conscience. November 2022. The verdict. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted in applause. The victims' families hugged each other, crying with relief. Judge Anderson announced the sentence a week later. "Robert Harris, the court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. 3 times. 3 life sentences. 1 for each life he ruined." Harris was led out of the courtroom under guard. He didn't look back at the victims' families after the verdict. Linda Richardson gave an interview outside the courthouse. "Justice has been served. Emma can rest in peace." Alex Thompson was more reserved. "The sentence won't bring my brother back, but other families are protected from this monster." Sophie's parents returned to Canada that evening. 9 years of struggle were over. Epilogue, Summer 2023. A memorial plaque was installed at Wonder Lake. Simple words on metal. In memory of Emma Richardson, Jake Thompson, and Sophie Clark. They sought the beauty of nature and found eternal peace. Linda Richardson comes here every year. She brings fresh flowers, sits on the shore, and tells her daughter about the year that has passed. The Missing Persons Foundation, created in memory of Emma, has helped find dozens of people. Photos of her daughter adorn the organization's office. Alex Thompson became a mountain safety instructor. He teaches tourists survival skills. Jake would be proud of his brother. Sophie's parents established a scholarship for young travel bloggers. Their daughter's dreams live on in a new generation. The National Park Service has tightened its procedures. All rangers undergo an annual psychological evaluation. Upon termination, all equipment must be returned. A GPS monitoring system tracks tourists in remote areas. Satellite communications work without interruption. The tragedy at Wonder Lake must never happen again, said the director of the Park Service. Robert Harris is serving his sentence in a maximum security prison. A solitary cell, 1 hour of exercise per day, no visitors. He reads books about nature and writes a diary. The spirits are still calling me, he writes, but the walls prevent me from hearing their voices. Psychiatrists are monitoring his condition. The disease is progressing. Reality has finally dissolved into delirium. He does not remember the faces of his victims. He does not understand the gravity of his actions. In his world, he is still a hero defending nature. Detective Sarah Mitchell retired in 2023. The Harris case was the last in her career. 40 years of service ended with a triumph of justice. "I've seen a lot of evil," she said at her farewell ceremony. "But good always wins. You just have to keep going." Her investigative methods are studied at the police academy. Students analyze the Lake Wonder case as an example of patient work. Lake Wonder has come back to life. Tourists are visiting the area again. Fishermen are casting their nets into the clear waters. Nature has healed its wounds. Thomas McDonald fishes here every summer. He is the same fisherman who found the memory card. The locals call him a hero. "I just did what I had to do," he responds to the praise. The families deserve the truth. The tragedy did not destroy the beauty of this place. The mountains are still reflected in the lake. Eagles soar above the water. Life goes on. The memory lives on. Emma Richardson dreamed of capturing the wild beauty of Alaska. Her last photos are on display at the Portland Museum of Nature. Jake Thompson planned to become the best guide in the state. A trail in Mount Rainier National Park is named after him. Sophie Clark wanted to show the world the wonders of travel. Her YouTube channel has become a memorial page with 1 million subscribers. They left too soon, but their dreams inspire others to seek beauty in the world. Justice prevailed. For 9 years, the family lived in uncertainty. They didn't know if their loved ones were alive. They hoped for a miracle that never came. A video recording from a memory card answered all their questions. The guilty party received his just punishment. The victims found peace. The story of Lake Wonder reminds us that evil can hide behind a mask of goodness. But the truth always comes to the surface, like that metal container in the fisherman's net. All you need is patience and faith in justice. Thomas McDonald still fishes on Lake Wonder. Every morning, he casts his nets into the clear water. He catches trout and pike. He enjoys the silence of the wilderness. But sometimes, looking at the bottom of the lake, he remembers that day in July 2022. The day when his nets pulled the truth from the depths. Some secrets should not remain hidden. he tells his wife over dinner. Lake Wonder no longer holds any secrets. Justice has prevailed. The memory of the victims lives on in the hearts of their loved ones. And Robert Harris spends his days in solitary confinement, talking to spirits that exist only in his sick mind. The story's over, but the lessons remain. Nature is beautiful, but it can be dangerous. It's not just wild animals that threaten tourists. The greatest danger comes from people who have lost touch with reality. Be careful when hiking. Tell your loved ones about your itinerary. Carry a means of communication. Trust your intuition. And remember, justice may be late, but it will always come. Emma, Jake, and Sophie rest in peace. Their killer is behind bars for good. Their families got the answers they had been waiting for 9 long years. What would you have done if you were in the place of these tourists? Would you have left at the stranger's request, or would you have tried to defend your rights?